One day in April 1992, a troubled 19-year-old was pulled over on a routine traffic stop on a southeastern Texas highway. The African-American driver, Ronald Ray Howard, had grown up in poverty and said he was beaten by his dad. That day, he was driving a stolen vehicle and blasting Tupac's "Tupacalypse Now" from the cassette deck. The music was up as loud as it could go, with gunshots and siren noises on it, and my heart was pounding hard, Howard said, as he watched a 40-something white state trooper named Bill Davidson approach his car. He grew agitated. I was so hyped up. I just snapped. I jacked a bullet in the chamber, and when he was close enough, I turned around and bam! I shot him. Howard was tried for murder, but his lawyer attempted to pin the blame on rap, arguing that Howard's favorite artists, including Tupac, NWA, and the Ghetto Boys, had unduly influenced him. Davidson's widow agreed. There isn't a doubt in my mind that my husband would still be alive if Tupac hadn't written these violent anti-police songs, and the companies involved hadn't published and put them out on the street, she said. Vice President Dan Quayle jumped into the fray, criticizing Tupacalypse Now, which features songs like Soldier Story and Trapped, in which characters murder police, and calling for Interscope to withdraw it from stores. There is absolutely no reason for a record like this to be published by a responsible corporation, Quayle said. They ain't even judged the dude that shot the cop yet, Tupac complained. And they judged me. In the end, the jury agreed that Howard's love for violent hip-hop had influenced him, but he was nonetheless convicted and given the death penalty, and was executed in 2005. Quayle, of course, had also denounced Ice-T's Cop Killer, and during the 80s and 90s, politicians frequently took shots at popular musicians. But while some record companies did not stand by their artists, Tupac's label Interscope, which would go on to sign controversial performers like Nine Inch Nails and Marilyn Manson, was different. Interscope's owners believed in the artist being able to say whatever they wanted, said journalist Jeffrey Jolson Colburn. And the more controversial, the better. A lot of this criticism of rap is just plain old racism, said Interscope co-founder Ted Field in 1993. You can tell the people who want to stop us from releasing controversial rap music one thing: kiss my ass. Field was a Chicago-born heir to a department store and media company fortune. He dabbled in the family businesses and became a successful race car driver before mashing his left hand in a 1975 accident. He reinvented himself as a Hollywood power player, producing hit movies like Revenge of the Nerds and Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. In 1989, he dove into the music industry, co-founding Interscope Records with Jimmy Iovine. If Field was born with a silver spoon, Iovine was self-made. He prided himself on his hardscrabble upbringing. Raised in a working-class Italian family in downtown Brooklyn, his father was a union longshoreman and drove a bread truck. Jimmy dropped out of criminal justice college and diligently worked his way into the music business. He got his first industry job as a teenager sweeping studio floors. He eventually became known as a guy who could make hit records, even with prickly personalities. He navigated the coked-up major label rock world of the 70s and 80s, coaxing top sellers out of artists like Stevie Nicks and Meatloaf. He worked as an engineer on Bruce Springsteen's Born to Run and John Lennon's Walls and Bridges, and produced Patti Smith's Easter. Like Dre, he was known for his tenacity and perfectionism. He's a heat-seeking missile, said Bono about Iovine, who produced the 1983 U2 live album, Under a Blood Red Sky. Jimmy wants everything cut like a diamond that can be seen from a long distance, and he's not subtle about how he tells you. But studio wizardry was one thing. With Interscope, Iovine sought to be a mogul. The label launched in 1990 as a joint venture with Atlantic Records. Field contributed some of his inheritance. He received millions when his father, Marshall Field IV, died, and Iovine contributed his expertise. There were questionable early decisions, like signing Gerardo, a Latino Vanilla Ice of sorts responsible for the gimmicky hit Rico Suave. Their roster also included Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch, also rather vanilla, though Good Vibrations remains the jam. When Dr. Dre met Iovine, the latter knew little about hip-hop. Iovine prided himself on being a man who could smell a hit in almost any genre. It's just that he found the product sonically lackluster. There was no oomph. But when Dre came to his office and played him Nothing But a G-Thing, it sounded so crisp and right that Iovine could barely believe it. "Who produced this?" "I did," said Dre. "Who's the engineer?" "I am." Urged on by a whip-smart A&R named John McClain, Interscope set their sights on securing the rights to The Chronic. But they knew it wouldn't be easy. Just about everyone in the industry was steering clear of Dre, owing both to his legal issues, the contract dispute with Ruthless, and bad publicity surrounding his arrests and lawsuits. Even Sony Records, which put out the Deep Cover soundtrack, had been scared off. Iovine didn't believe everything he read in the news. "If this was a white artist, I believe that these court cases would be a footnote in the story," he said. He set about untangling the strands of Dre's legal situation. He helped negotiate a deal with Ruthless, which would see a cut. Then Iovine worked on Dre's deal with Priority, which also had him under contract. Iovine was able to do legally what Suge had allegedly attempted with baseball bats. Dre reportedly received $1 million advance from his new deal as part of a complicated food chain. Dre recorded for Death Row, which had a distribution deal with Interscope, which in turn was partly owned by Atlantic, a Time Warner company. "Nobody wanted to take a chance on me because of all that legal shit," said Dre. "Jimmy made it happen." They became attached at the hip. Dre was grateful for an ally, someone who truly understood his brilliance. Sure, Eazy-E and Jerry Heller appreciated his hit-making abilities, but they seemed to treat him like a commodity. Iovine, a producer himself, knew he was a treasure. Iovine allowed Dre to expand his role as well, tapping him to direct the video for Let Me Ride in 1993. Once, as he watched Dre ease into a lowrider, hitting switches to bounce the car up and down like a shark devouring its prey, something dawned on Iovine. Snoop and Dre were the new Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. Brilliant musicians and cultural spokesmen alike, they'd soon be dictating what kids listened to, how they moved through the world, and what they wore. Indeed, baseball caps, hoodies, bulky sports jackets, and baggy pants remain classic youth garb to this day. This wasn't a British invasion. This was a West Coast invasion. The lingua franca of the new youth movement would be the language of the inner city.
For more of these fascinating stories and true crimes, subscribe to Charles Arnis World. Thanks for watching.